Hello, all you wonderful midwives and midwifery supporting people, and greetings from the headquarters of the World Health Organization in Geneva in Switzerland. I would like to start by thanking the virtual IDM team for providing me with this opportunity to raise a few issues on the International Day of the Midwife 2017, which are key to WHO and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. You will have just heard Mary Renfrew discussing the evidence in the seminal 2014 Lancet series on midwifery. This is groundbreaking work. The Quality Maternal Newborn Health Framework has been enormously important to WHO. I don't go anywhere without this series. Having this evidence at our fingertips is a game changer. Midwives with the power of evidence? What a difference this is making. There are many excellent activities going on in midwifery globally, and the momentum is growing. As you know, the theme of this year's IDM is about partnership between midwives and mothers, and partnerships extend to all of those supporting midwifery globally. So, I am going to focus on 3 important WHO documents developed through partnership. So this first slide shows these 3 important strategies and documents. The first one is the Global Strategy for Women, Children's and Adolescent Health, 2016 to 30. And I really encourage you to look at this. It's not a heavy document. It's a wonderful advocacy tool filled with facts and figures about how we can work together to improve the situation. The second one is new standards for improving quality of maternal and newborn care in health facilities. And this sets out standards for care that we've not had before. I'll come back to that in more detail. And the third one is Midwives' Voices, Midwives' Realities, which reflects the findings from a global survey with the International Confederation of Midwives and the White Ribbon Alliance, in which 2,500 midwives took place, and there are some really wonderful findings from that. So what is WHO's role as a UN partner in midwifery? As the global UN agency that directs and coordinates international health within the United Nations system, WHO is led by and provides support to 194 member states. WHO has 6 specific roles which impact on midwifery care. This slide shows the 6 core functions of WHO and how they relate to midwifery. Each UN agency has a slightly different role to play here, so I just wanted to highlight that in the first box, WHO's role in terms of health leadership, partnerships and joint action is really critical in midwifery, in terms of shaping the research agenda and making sure we have the right knowledge, in setting norms and standards and promoting monitoring of our midwifery work, in making sure we have policies that are really evidence-based, and that's quite a big issue for midwifery at the moment, making sure that we provide technical support and institutional capacity building across those 194 countries, and finally monitoring the global health situation and assessing health trends. And there are many areas where midwifery is really key to that, for example, in the recent Ebola outbreak. I am going to focus on the SDG 3, Good Health and Wellbeing, and this global strategy for women, children and adolescents 2016 to 30, developed by my department, which sets out how we can work towards improving SDG 3. This is a slide that will be very, very familiar to many of you. And what can I say? Absolute absence of quality of care, and it's a human rights abuse to leave women in these conditions for childbirth. And this is at the root of everything we're now doing in WHO, through the SDG 3 work and in our quality of care standards document. We have to end this situation. I hope we really don't have any more photographs like this in the near future. Importantly, and in contrast to the MDGs, SDG 3 is not only about Survive, the emergency obstetric care programme we are familiar with, but it is about Thrive and Transform, and this is what midwives do. This slide is taken from the Global Strategy 9 Action Points combined with the State of the World Midwifery Reports 2011 and 2014. So I've brought together the Education Regulation Association of the SOMI reports and put it together with the 9 action points of the global strategy. Good health and well-being is the SDG 3. The Every Woman, Every Child is the overarching umbrella for this. And under that comes the global strategy for women, children and adolescent. And within that is quality of care and midwifery care. We must make sure in looking at education, regulation and association that we have the right evidence for the norms and standards of care that we are providing. And that is why that WHO standards document around the time of childbirth is so important. We have no economic analysis globally about why midwifery is the right choice economically for ministers of finance and ministers of health. We need to make that argument during this SDG period. Similarly, despite the fact that most health workers are women and most midwives within that group are also women, we're without a gender analysis to guide midwifery and midwives as to how we best go about giving that care, but also making sure midwives themselves are supported in the workplace. We also need to make sure we monitor and evaluate very carefully the midwifery programs we implement. We are quite weak in that area, rather surprisingly. And a big push forward is taking place now around accountability. We must be accountable for our work in midwifery, and we must also hold governments and others to account. Of the 9 action points, the first is around country leadership. Now, if we can make sure that every chief government nursing or nursing and midwifery officer is involved at high-level meetings everywhere to make sure midwifery is part of the discussion, it would make a huge change, along with ensuring the Midwifery Association president is there and that we are visible and participating in important leadership meetings. Secondly, we have an opportunity now to be much more engaged as midwives in debates and discussions around financing for health. Too often midwifery is seen as a project rather than mainstream embedded in the health system. Thirdly, if you really think about it carefully, health system resilience really depends massively upon midwifery to ensure all the antenatal, childbirth, postnatal and other care around family planning and maternal health and newborn care is there all the time. If we don't have strong midwifery in countries, we end up with weak health systems. The fourth action point is around individual potential, and although this is about women, adolescents and children, it is also about us as midwives being women. We as midwives can help women reach their individual potential, and by doing that we become stronger as midwives. So this is about women being able to really support women achieve that fourth action point. The fifth action point really doesn't need describing. Community engagement and continuity of care is what midwifery is all about. And too often we see midwives trained for far too short a time and left for many years just doing deliveries in a central hospital and not being able to really reach out to women in the communities as they can and should be able to do. This sixth point about multi-sectoral action is really important for midwifery. We're not delivering one single clinical intervention. So issues like breastfeeding and upholding the code, antimicrobial resistance and making sure midwives are ensuring clean and safe birth so the need for antibiotics reduces, talking to women and their partners about tobacco cessation during pregnancy so that newborns are born much healthier, making sure that water and sanitation are there and available, that women can access toilets, can move, and that the area is really clean is unbelievably important. And we need to work out a way of working with the adolescent community. Too many adolescents are giving birth without the special support that they need from midwives. The seventh point about humanitarian and fragile settings could never be more relevant. We've seen more recently in the Ebola outbreak that it was midwives who were at the forefront and who took the brunt. They were the ones who were there for women and newborns right the way through. More recently in the Nepal earthquake, it was midwives who led the health response. And it was the government and partners who funded the midwives to keep the health system going. We are absolutely critical to humanitarian and fragile settings. Research and innovation, Mary Renfrew has already discussed that. We are in a very good place. It's got to continue to get stronger and the evidence to be heard more and more, and for us to know, understand and use it. And finally, accountability is increasingly important, and there is a new Interagency accountability panel, and we need to engage. It's wonderful news that Dr. Adres Malata, the Vice President of the ICM, is on the global panel on quality of care for the Lancet series. Our voices are getting louder and more clearer. So all of these issues are things that we must work together and support. Now is our opportunity during this SDG period to embed our midwifery work well within all of these areas and demonstrate globally what a change for women, newborns and adolescents that we can really make. Last but not least, all of this is about human rights and putting midwifery into a human rights framework. And that's not just about human rights for women, it's also about the rights of us as women who are midwives. Very briefly, I won't go through this in detail. This is the new WHO Quality of Care Framework. It involves both the provision of care, we're very familiar with what you need to do to support a woman, but importantly, for the first time, it embodies the experience of care by the woman. And this is all about effective communication, ensuring respect and dignity, and providing emotional support. And this is where, as midwives, we really need to shine. We can't manage everything in the health system, the human resources, the wash and everything else, but whatever else is going on around us, we can really make sure that standards 4, 5 and 6 are upheld by midwives. This is the difference between us and other practitioners. So what is the problem? Why are midwives unable to provide that quality of care? And what can we as midwives do about it? As I mentioned, we have the Midwives' Voices, Midwives' Realities report that showed in 2016 that 2,500 midwives globally were ready to have their voices heard. Backing this up was a very important piece of research which identified why is it we're finding it difficult to provide that quality of care. And too often midwives are blamed for things that go wrong or didn't happen. So what our evidence found out was that there are 3 barriers. The first one is socio-cultural. Care at birth continues to be considered as women's work, and there is a lack of acceptance of midwifery. Any transgression of accepted gender norms, for example, women leave the home and go and earn money by caring for other women, seems to be rejected still in too many societies. And not surprisingly, many women giving care around the world in communities are highly vulnerable to physical and sexual assault, and this is also taking place in health facilities. Secondly, there are significant economic barriers faced by women who practice midwifery that are not experienced by other health workers. The infrequent wages that fail to meet even the most basic living costs are too common, and we know that many women are the main supporters of their families. There is a huge lack of investment in safe accommodation. Many of you will have been to places where you would not want to stay a night. They are not clean and they are absolutely not safe. And thirdly, we have professional barriers. We know much more about this area. In particular, there's been a massive lack of investment in education during the MDG period, very little support to regulation. There is weak professional autonomy, and medical hierarchies continue to constrain the scope of midwifery practice. So all of these things add up together, and we get overlap in these 3 circles. Firstly, we find that there is a gender penalty from the low social status of women and the low social status of midwives. So we are generally paid an awful lot less than others that have our skills. Midwifery has been feminised historically, and that means it's not professionally valued in many countries where women's status remains low. All of this adds up to a midwife who experiences extreme moral distress. She knows she wants to care for this woman, she wants things to work out, but she can't manage it. She becomes very distressed, very quickly burnt out, and poor quality of care can result. We really need to work together to have our voices heard and to stop this happening. And engaging in the global midwifery advocacy strategy, collaborating, coordinating our work and working together as one is the real way forward for the SDG period. Gender inequality underpins all of this, and we must work together to highlight that, talk about it, and make it upfront in all of our plans and strategies. So now we have the evidence, we have the SDGs and the strategies that bring midwifery to the forefront. Now is your chance to speak up, make a real change, join the global midwifery advocacy strategy developed and led by the White Ribbon Alliance. I look forward to a really exciting year and to being in touch. Thank you.